Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Cosmic I Ching, the Oracle of the Cosmic Way. And here we are on Hexagram 29, the abyss / danger. And interestingly enough, recently I asked the I Ching about COVID, actually, and it actually returned this hexagram for me. So keep that in mind. I think that's very illustrative when we're talking about this hexagram, that COVID is the abyss, and we'll see exactly what the abyss is talking about. And this is one of my favorite judgments out of all the hexagrams, with the judgment, which is the abyss repeated. If you are sincere, you have success in your heart, and whatever you do succeeds. I love that. I love that. The sage uses this hexagram to make us aware that the abyss is a false description of an aspect of the cosmic consciousness as a bottomless pit of utter darkness into which one can fall and become permanently lost. This image falsely associates the cosmic consciousness with what a person is afraid of, what he does not understand, or what he is unable to verify with his forebrain. The abyss is also a metaphor for the collective monumental fears a person has stored in his psyche, and as such is the fearful aspect of the demonic sphere of consciousness created by the collective ego. That sounds exactly like what COVID is, right? In this regard, the hexagram is connected with the very real danger that the true self might fall into oblivion. The person may forget who he actually is. This is something that can actually happen if the ego completely takes over the personality. The abyss is also the fear of death the person can experience, a fear created by the collective ego, and it's picturing the end of life in a body as a loss. The sage makes us aware that loss as a term has no cosmic validity, and this is why the words in the judgment of hexagram 55 say, abundance, be not sad. Shine like the sun at midday. The main theme of this hexagram is the way fears operate in the psyche. The psyche, in I Ching terms, is the invisible aspect of a person's whole being. It refers to the person's total consciousness, including what is called the unconscious and the subconscious. Fears that enter the mind are stored throughout the body and the cells themselves. Some are located in the brain, some in the heart and in other organs, while others are located in the muscles. Sometimes in meditation, they show themselves in the areas where they are stored. Fears are stored in the body as feeling memories. These feelings are connected with the adrenaline that accompanied the experience that caused them. They are feelings, so to speak, that become congealed and which recreate a sense of alarm when any event similar to the original experience is encountered. That's probably what PTSD is all about. While fears are of many sorts and have many causes, this hexagram addresses the primal fears of the psyche, such as fear of the unknown, death, punishment, abandonment, and of not having enough essential nourishment for one's whole being, whether that is actually food or chi energy. Primal fears comprise the source of all other fears. These primal fears have their origin in the inner experience of being separated from the cosmic whole, which happens when the access to one's inner truth gets blocked. This experience is what the I Ching means when it speaks of the loss of innocence, as described in hexagram 25, innocence. This hexagram shows what happens in the brain when the ego is the absolute ruler of the personality. The rational mind operates autonomously, thus excluding the midbrain and the brainstem. You see that word autonomously. It's very much connected with AI, artificial intelligence. Which is kind of like what the ego is, right? This computer program, this virus that starts to live a life of its own. It operates autonomously, thus excluding the midbrain and the brainstem, which those things connect a person with his inner truth and with the cosmic consciousness. The false self-confidence that accompanies the development of the ego represses his fears that are created by the collective ego's mistaken ideas about life and the nature of the cosmos in the first place into the subconscious. However, the self-confidence is only a thin mask covering them. During periods of crisis and shock, this self-confidence collapses, throwing the entire personality into doubt and disarray and dismay. It is in such situations that a person receives this hexagram, which is given to him to help him understand the dynamics of the situation and to return him to a place of inner safety. The counsel he is given begins with the statement, if you are sincere, you have success in your heart, and whatever you do succeeds. Sincerity comes when a person recognizes that despite his greatest efforts, he cannot do alone what he needs to do to help himself. In this state, he calls out for help, not knowing where the help will come from. And this is the moment when the help comes. It comes from the sage that draws all the other helpers of the invisible world that the person needs at that time. In terms of consciousness, the trigram Khan, as described in part 1, stands for the role of thinking. Here, where the trigram is doubled, we are presented with the state of mind in which a person is trying to resolve a problem merely through thinking. This creates the danger of his getting lost in a maze of fears because he's trying to resolve through thinking a problem that has been created by thinking that has been divorced from feeling. Spells connected with this hexagram have to do with the number of images projected onto the cosmic consciousness, such as being unknowable, as an abyss into which one can fall and be lost forever, or a hell of eternal suffering. These images lock the person into an abyss of fears that prevent him from recognizing the caring and loving nature of the cosmos and from receiving its help and protection. They also prevent him from realizing that there is no cosmic abyss into which he can fall. In fact, the only abyss that exists is the demonic sphere of consciousness created by the erroneous ideas and beliefs of the collective ego. Line 1, repetition of the abysmal. In the abyss, one falls into the pit, misfortune. Repetition of the abysmal refers to the fears that haunt a person's subconscious. By not resisting them, they gain extraordinary power, the meaning of falling into the pit in the abyss, leading him to act rashly, creating misfortune. Line 2, the abyss is dangerous. One should strive to attain small things only. The abyss is dangerous counsels a person not to act so long as he is being influenced by his fears. One should strive to attain small things only is saying to turn his attention inward to address and free himself from those fears before he does anything else. The fears, which are stored in the psyche as words and images, have dressed up in demonic forms, such as shadowy figures or demons, dragons, and imps, which have declared themselves to be invincible and to be a part of himself from which he cannot free himself. This line tells him that they are not part of him, but are intruders into his inner space. He needs to ask in meditation for the cosmic army to kill them. Once their demonic manifestations have been killed, their true nature as words and images becomes visible, and they can be rejected through saying the inner no to them. The abyss is dangerous also refers to a mistaken idea about death as the final end of life. It's not. Line 3, forward and backward, abyss on abyss. In danger like this, pause at first and wait. Otherwise, you will fall into a pit in the abyss. Do not act in this way. Forward and backward refers to being buffeted between two fears, as in the expression to be between a rock and a hard place. This indicates a person who sees only two alternatives in the given situation, and therefore fears he will be crushed no matter which he chooses. Because this he fails to recognize the existence of the invisible world and its helpers, he is left to his own devices without help. Pause at first and wait is counsel for him to look for the help he needs from the sage and to address the problem in the inner realm, where the only true and lasting solutions can be found. This line can also refer to a person who finds himself in a double bind created by two opposing standards of the collective ego, so that whichever way he moves, it is incorrect. An example is the modern woman who has been liberated from the old models of a woman's role in the world to follow a career. At the same time, she retains the ancient belief that to be a real woman, she must have had a child. These views set her into a continuous conflict mode with herself, which makes her doubt herself, whichever path she chooses. Both models lead her away from recognizing that in and of herself she is adequate without having to fulfill any pre-assigned role. This line also points to the poison arrow of guilt taken on by a person who believes in original fault. Such an idea plunges him into the abyss of self-conflict. The cosmic way out of the situation is to rid himself of the poison arrow of guilt. Pause at first and wait counsels a person to stop when in danger and find out the inner truth of the situation before acting. Line 4, a jug of wine, a bowl of rice with it, Earthen vessels simply handed in through the window. There is certainly no blame in this. Receiving this line informs a person that the sage is coming to help. The sage comes to help because the person has asked for help. Therefore, the gifts needed that truly nourish and aid him are given simply and without strings attached. The sage acts without blame. Line 5. The abyss is not filled to overflowing. It is filled only to the rim. No blame. This line draws attention to the rim that surrounds the abyss as that element in the psyche that keeps the contents of the subconscious from overflowing its boundaries. The rim is thus the borderline that separates a person's subconscious from his conscious mind. When someone is addressing his problems in cooperation with the sage brings the person's fears from his subconscious to his conscious mind in the exact sequence that is best for him. The sage carefully watches over this borderline in such a way that the person is never overwhelmed. This line also points to someone who thinks that he can keep his fears under control through being reasonable, or by counterbalancing them with positive thinking, with positive imaging, or by sheer self-discipline. Attempts to counteract fears are not successful because they ignore the root causes. Success is achieved by rooting them out one by one under the guidance of the sage. Line 6, bound with cords and ropes, shut in between thorn-hedged prison walls. For 3 years, one does not find the way, misfortune. This line is about the fear of suffering and the fear of death. Bound with cords and ropes refers to the fate that these fears create in that they project themselves into reality. The prison walls refer to the spells these fears put on various parts of the psyche. That the walls are described as thorn hedge refers to their entangling quality as they affect all parts of the person's life. When he lives in fear of death, this fear transmits itself to every aspect of his life. Thus, he misses out on the fullness of life and its invigorating quality. If he sees this principle clearly, he will say the inner no to the seed phrase that perpetuates the fear of death, which is all things end in death. A seed phrase that needs to be rejected. That's what all this is about. Making clear these seed phrases and images, which all comes back to the false use of language, which has created our parallel reality, the demonic sphere of consciousness we're living in right now. 3 years refers to the fact that spells are made up of a circular reference, which leads the person around in circles. A circular reference is a false logical construction, basic premises of which is a half-truth. A half-truth is a relative truth that has been converted into an absolute truth. The half-truth in this case is life is suffering. Suffering is not a natural part of life. It is what a person experiences when he has excluded the helpers in all that he does. The sage makes us aware that there are helpers available for every circumstance. They're activated by every sincere call for help. When the ego has caused the person to ignore the cornucopia of gifts the cosmos gives daily, helpers no longer come and the person suffers. The circular reference thus proves the premise on which it is based. All right, guys, that was Hexagram 29. Don't worry, if you have success in your heart, whatever you do succeeds. See you guys next time.